That's where we go. Hello, everybody. Just a technical issue we needed to rectify, and we're going to be right with you, uh, making sure that we get to talk about all these things related to emotions and feelings for exit planning. I just need to turn off the heater because, as you can see, I'm getting a little overheated here. And my guest, or my co host, I should say, Dr. Donna, is right on her way. I'm just checking with her now to see how things are going because, there's always a first time for everything. And there's always bound to be something that you didn't quite plan on. So I hope everybody's doing really well today. And I will be right with you. Hello, Dr. Donna.
Hello.
My user error because there was a little hover button where I had to add you to the stage and I was not aware of that. So I reminded everybody that, sometimes things happen and
Yes.
We are very excited to be with them all today. So thank you all for joining us. Donna, do you want to get us started?
Sure, absolutely. So, well, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Donna Marino, and I am a psychologist who works with family businesses to help them preserve their legacy from things like unsuccessful succession, poor leadership, and fractured communication. I'm joined here by Christy Maxfield. Christy, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. When I'm not learning a new technology for the very first time live on LinkedIn, I work with business owners to help them improve their profitability so that they can have as many succession and exit planning options as they want. So the idea is that we focus on growth now in order to increase income and valuation in the future. And since I'm you interacting with all sorts of business owners like Dr. Donna, we encounter many of the same topics and are excited to talk to you about them right now.
Definitely. And as Christy and I have been planning this and talking, we realize that we have a very unique strategy to helping businesses transition. And one of the things we want to do today is break down the myths and barriers about succession and how people think about it. Christy, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the common myths you see?
Sure. Um, I was raised in a family business, and I know from my own experience that part of the myth was I don't have to plan ahead; things will work out. Right. Probably, I don't know exactly remember my dad saying it, but I'm sure he thought, well, I'll just work forever. And I actually hear that a lot. It's starting to change generationally, where older generations very much were like, I'm going to die at my desk, which just does not sound appealing. But younger generations really looking at how is my business going to help me live the way I want to live versus be the only thing I do with my life. But I definitely still hear on numerous occasions, I just plan to work forever. And actually, one client said to me, I plan to work forever, and forever just arrived.
Interesting. Interesting. I hear those as well. And I'll see, people in their 70s and 80s who are still working in the business or are just not able to, hand over the reins, even when they're kind of in a sideline role. They're not active, but they just can't let go yet.
Yeah. I think the most extreme I saw, and it kind of broke my heart, was talking to a woman who was on hospice who really did not, the best I could surmise was did not want to be the one who made the final decision and really wanted someone else, her heirs, to make some of those decisions for her. And I can understand where that comes from because we're going to talk about all the emotional stuff, the psychological stuff that goes into being a business owner and the identity of being a business owner and what that that role means way beyond just employing people and having meaning and purpose in life. But have you heard other ideas that you would like, just, oh man, I wish you didn't think that way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just for an example, first of what we were talking about too, is I've had clients where the owner, founder, whoever's leading that company in their generation has a sudden medical,
Oh yeah.
uh, you know, that medical issue that takes them out of the business immediately. It's a crisis, or sadly, even worse, they die and nobody is ready for this. You
And
know,
grief is to be grieving and to be dealing with that. Oh my goodness.
right, on top of you're in crisis mode trying to jump in with no plan and you're grieving. But to speak to another one of those myths, since you opened the door there, Christy, about the emotional factors, those get clearly ignored. People think that only the financial or legal issues need to be addressed, and truly underestimate what it means to your identity to let go of that business that you've put that blood, sweat, and tears in.
Oh, absolutely. And because they think that emotions are inconsequential, when we do start talking, and for those of you who don't know, while I dabble in the emotional things, Dr. Donna is the specialist in the emotional things. So those conversations come up a lot in the context of the finance piece. But if they're not dealt with, folks can actually sabotage deals, and they can sabotage the transition to family members as well as sales to key management, employees, or third parties. Because when our emotions are so out of whack with what's going on, when we really aren't emotionally aligned to the thing that we've said we absolutely want and are committed to doing, I don't know about you, but I've had my emotions sabotage me because um, I'm trying to do something that it's just not aligned with who I am. And consequently, you say things and you do things that can undermine what you're trying to do. Have you seen that too?
Oh, definitely. I have seen people, pull out of their succession plan that this was going to go to the next generation, and they're all hyped and excited and ready to make their mark. And at the last minute, the previous generation can't step away. And I've just seen people just sabotage when they're selling their company, and they hire people to get them the best deal, for M&A, and then they get, 5, 10 offers and they walk away. They just can't do it.
Yeah. And I also think there are a few folks who know that they are going to sell in the future, but they think it's going to be super easy. That whenever they want to do it, it's like putting a house on the market, which is not quite as straightforward as putting a house on the market, which in my mind is still pretty complicated, which is why we use brokers, right? But that's completely under their own control. And that means that they're not necessarily thinking about what is the buyer finding most attractive? What are the external circumstances that make this selling this business at this time a good idea, a marketable idea? Or just having their own bandwidth, because knowing how to run a business doesn't mean you know how to sell a business. And like you said, they put together a lot of advisors, because we'll talk about this more too. If it takes a lot of people, because starting a business, you can get on a Secretary of State website, pay a few bucks, and you can have an LLC before the end of our conversation. Undoing that's a whole lot more complicated, especially once you have revenue, expenses, employees, buildings, assets, inventory. So that I see that a lot too. Just a misconception of what the process is, and that it is a process and not just I'm ready to go. Let's sell this thing.
Right. And sadly and understandably, owners often overvalue their company. And so they're
Oh
in
God.
for a shock. And if you've made a financial plan based on inflated numbers, then what?
Or if you haven't made any financial plan, you finally sit down and run the numbers of what it's going to take to live for a good long time, we hope. And even if you sell the business, it won't produce enough of a principal for you to then generate the income you need. That's terrifying. I mean, quite frankly, I know that my business, I may not be able to sell my business unless I grow it in different ways over the next 10 to 15 years, right? Which is why I'm really clear that it has to hit my income and my savings goals every year that I'm in operation, so that there is no wake up one day and, let's see if we can get something for it, right?
Yeah,
Um, because that, I mean, I don't think I could sleep at night if I didn't know that number, but a lot of folks don't know that number.
it's true. It's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, and they're focused on the growth of the company, but they forget to plan for the end. They're just planning for right now.
And all growth isn't equal. Growth that keeps me embedded in the business and 100% dependent on me for something like sales or paying all of the bills or doing all of the invoicing or having the main customer contacts and relationships, or even just knowing my dad was a florist. He could have told you exactly how many roses to order for Valentine's Day. But there was no formula for that. There was no, like, I could probably have gone through handwritten records year after year of what he had done. But, he knew that we'd probably get a snowstorm, and, you know, he just knew things that could not be codified. So yeah, there's so much that goes into that. So what do people really need to know? What should we be asking folks to focus on then?
Yeah. One of the things that I think they really need to understand is that this is a process, not an event. And
Yeah.
it takes a lot of planning and like you excuse me, like you were saying about 10 to 15 years, this is what it needs to look like. Plan early. It's never too early, as Stephen Covey says. Begin with the end in mind,
Yeah.
and lots of people don't do that, and then they're shocked at the end.
They really are. And I think a lot of people think planning with the end in mind means I'm absolutely going to sell. And it doesn't mean that. What it means is that I'm going to build my business in a way that gives me as many exit options as possible when I want them. Right? So even if your plan is one day I'm just going to stop working, I'm going to close the lights, turn off the email, say goodbye to everybody, go live on my retirement savings. That's fine. Um, but you may change your mind at some point, and you might be like, hey, I actually built something even more incredible than I thought it could be. And I would like to see how this could live on past me. But if you haven't built the business to do that, like when I say I don't think I could sell my business, it's because if I'm not here, it doesn't run. I literally have to get more people and more systems and more processes in place and more. There has to be more in order for it to be more than just me. And I can't decide that 10 years from now and expect to have a lucrative exit in what would then be a relatively short period of time. So for me, it's all about options. How can I get as many
Mhm.
choices as possible?
Yeah, I mean, you need to have a plan A, B, and C, right? And you need to communicate these things. There are so many assumptions that are made. I've talked with, you know, second and third gens who are ready to pass it on, and they assume their family members know what they want, or they assume somebody
Mhm.
wants the business or doesn't want the business. I had a client who sold off the business, and not until afterwards did the next gen say, "Why didn't you offer us an opportunity to buy it?"
Oh,
Right? How it's heartbreaking, and in some cases that can just ruin a relationship.
yes. Yes. And even I go back to my own experience. I'm the oldest of four. And when my father was ill, I did say to him, if you want one of us to have something, whether it's the house or a car or the business or whatever it is, please don't give it to all four of us. that's going to put us in an untenable situation.
Mm.
Even if we know you want one of us to have it, you've given it to four of us. And now a whole nother layer of emotions and what is fair and what is equitable and what I deserve and what does this other person deserve. I know we all like to think we're without judgment, but I haven't met anybody who doesn't have some underlying feelings about all of those things I just mentioned. And I think for my dad, talking about it made it really real that he was sick and that he was dying and that he would have to make choices, or that we would be in a position to have to do things. And quite frankly, I think it was just denial, straight up denial. If I don't talk about it, it doesn't happen, even though we all knew that. Like, I also haven't met a business owner who's not going to pass away one day.
Right, right. And think about, I understand that it is hard to face, right? Your business, really, it's like another member of the family. I say that all the time. When you have a family business or a private company, there's so much focus on it. It pays for your livelihood, and it's really another member. So passing that on or selling it, it can be just a huge disruption to your identity. It's your baby, right? And now what are you going to do? And you identify with, I built this business.
Yeah.
In America, the first thing we ask, right, is what do you do?
What do you do?
And when that is getting disrupted, you have to think about, what are you going to do instead? And you have to prepare for that. Otherwise, you're passing this on to your children. You haven't, hypothetically, right?
Correct.
You haven't thought about all this. And now, like, you didn't plan and you're dumping that on them. And that's not what you want either.
It isn't. It really isn't. I mean, as much as my dad was in denial, I don't think he intentionally set out to make things complicated for us. I think life was complicated for him, and what he was feeling was very complicated for him. And we didn't necessarily talk about those things before he got sick. So why, my mother often said to me during his illness, even though they were divorced, your dad's not going to change simply because he's sick. Right. And I think that that's also the thing we have to realize, is that who we are is, there are definitely patterns in how we operate, which means that if you know someone is less inclined to, if the owner, if you're the kid or the spouse or the brother or sister or whomever you are, maybe you're even an external senior management team leader. And you can see, like, they're just not built to have this conversation without somebody actually instigating it, then that's where I would want to lean into somebody like Dr. Donna to be able to say, how do I even initiate this conversation in a way that they're not going to completely shut down? They're not going to tell me to go fly a kite. They're not going to tell me it's all going to be fine, don't worry about it. But that we can maybe have an actual dialogue of, well, what if it turned out this way? Would you want that? Would that be okay with you? How could we avoid that?
Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things. Do folks come to you to ask, sort of like, how do I even bring this topic up?
Oh, absolutely. They'll notice that the family isn't talking about it. And they do need someone who can help facilitate those conversations in a non threatening way. Someone who's not coming in with assumptions about who everybody is based on a long history together. Someone, too, who can notice all of the nonverbals, notice when someone's holding back. And I notice that I hear differently. So I'll hear this underlying message and call it out and say, like, did you hear that this person, doesn't want this challenge for you and they're afraid?
Yeah.
And bringing all of that in the room and out in the open. I mean, if you think about your own families, how do you be the facilitator of a highly emotional conversation when you're one of the parties involved? You really need outside perspective.
I 100% agree. And that ability to recognize that all business is in fact personal. Like, a lot of owners say to me when we're working together on specifically how they can grow their business, That requires working with people. And people are emotional creatures. And they often will be like, I wish people could just come to work and do their work and not bring all that emotion into the workplace. But fundamentally, we are emotional creatures. Those employees aren't going to come without their emotions, but you're also not going to come without yours. And so to kind of pretend like this is a work setting, this is business, this isn't about how I feel, this is about the numbers and what makes sense. It's just not true.
Exactly. I know everybody wants to think that they make the logical or rational decision and they don't make decisions from emotion. But what happens is we make the decision out of emotion and then we use rationalization and logic to back up our decision. And
Oh,
this is
that's
not.
fascinating. That
Oh,
makes
yeah.
complete sense to me. Like, this is the decision I made. Now, how do I rationalize this? I'm having another
Right.
cookie, even though I'm trying to lose weight. How do I rationalize? Well, I didn't have a cookie yesterday, and I won't have a cookie tomorrow, and I'm gonna like march in place while I'm having my cookie.
And I had a bad day and I deserve it. And
All of that, right?
right, right. And there's research to support what I just said. It's
Oh, I have
not
no
just
doubt.
right. One of the things I want to make sure we really talk about today, Christy, is how having a team of experts that work together, not siloed, right? You don't want your leadership team working in a silo. You don't want your advisors working in a silo. You want to make sure they're all moving in the same direction towards a common goal,
Yes.
and you're not getting conflicting advice.
Yes.
And I really appreciate that you do things in the business that are not my expertise, and you can help the family on that side. Can you share with us about your experience and why you like working in a team?
Oh, absolutely. So oftentimes people call me when they want to grow their business. Increasingly, I'm getting the calls from folks who want to grow their business specifically to execute on their succession or their exit plan. But even way before that, I would say my clients are 30s, 40s, 50s, and then some of my more senior clients are definitely engaged in the exit planning conversation. But even in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, we're having a conversation about how do we grow this organization smart. And I am not a marketing specialist. I'm not a CPA, not a lawyer, not a therapist. I dabble in all of those things because all of those things are part of what goes into building the business. I'm not an HR specialist, right? Like there's a lot of things that I don't have a deep, deep expertise on. But that once we get through the planning piece and prioritizing and taking action, we often find we need more depth of bench. We really do need an expert to help us sort through some or execute on certain things. So that's true even if we're just growing the business and we're not talking about exit planning. But you add exit planning, and I would argue there's no one who can do it alone, right? You'd have to be a JD, CPA, financial wealth advisor with a good dose of psychology and some business growth and scaling experience.
Yeah, it takes a village. It really does.
Because you're probably working through emotional issues around money and fairness and inheritance and legacy. And then you get to practical questions like, so what's the annual revenue? What's been your great rate of growth year over year? What's the profitability? How much money does it generate for you to live off of? How much would you need to sell it for in order to have the money you need to live off of? Most owners aren't going to know those answers right off the top of their heads. And some of them have never asked those questions before. But in order for you to help them manage feelings around money and legacy and identity and decision making and control, we're going to actually have to talk some brass tacks. And so we have to get the wealth advisor to understand, what is your retirement going to look like? What is that next? I often say golf and grandkids only go so far for most people, right?
Yeah.
And have you built a friend network outside of work? And do you have purpose in meeting, whether it's in your faith community or in your volunteering work or with your family? So, we're asking folks not just to come up with a number, but to come up with a number that reflects what they're going to do, what they're going to experience, who they're going to be in relationship with. And then we often have the estate piece. So, how is that actually going to work? What's going to happen? What kind of legal documents do we have to have in place? And people really wrestle with actually making the decision so the lawyer can type the letters onto the piece of paper, right? That's a big deal. I have a lot of conversations about what's the right thing to do. As a recovering get it right person, the unfortunate answer for those of us looking for the single right answer is there's a lot of different ways to do it. And that's when, again, we have to bring in a CPA who can talk about tax consequences, with an estate planner who can say, here's legal documents you need, with a wealth advisor who says, this is how much money we need out of the transaction to help you live the way you want to. And then usually folks like me who help quarterback and make sure all those folks are talking to each other, remind them that in addition to that dollar amount, these are the priorities Donna has identified as being really important to her. This is where she's feeling some kind of way about this transaction. So we have to be sensitive about that, her feelings about this transaction. Oh, and P.S., there's external relationships and family relationships we probably need help with. I got to bring Donna in. different Donna in this scenario. So the team, like I can't underestimate or you cannot underestimate or overestimate. I might be getting my estimates wrong. You really, really, really need people you can trust and who you can trust to talk to each other so that they know this isn't about one of them being right. This is about helping you execute your plan.
Yeah. You need that level of communication among the family and the advisors. And when I have, facilitated a family succession meeting and we've had the whole team there, you can get so much done with everybody in the room. I have seen people who have backed out of their succession and then within 2 meetings, here the kids are saying he's never going to leave the business, never going to leave the business. And then in 2 meetings with the whole team there, we've got everything ironed out, the legal documents, the finance, the ownership. I mean, the whole thing in something that has been years of resentment and fear. And it's amazing what you can accomplish and how quickly when you have your whole team on board.
Yes. Donna, you and I both like to work with families and owners well in advance of any secession or exit planning.
Mm-hmm.
But do you also get brought in after the deal is done?
Yes.
And what does that look like?
Yeah. So typically if I'm working with them early on, I'm able to be with them through the process, get the person who is leaving the business ready with a plan of how they're going to stay mentally stimulated and active,
so
right? These are smart people.
Yes.
So it's a process of like getting them ready, getting next gen ready, having those meetings to iron out details. And then often I stay on then to help the new leadership acclimate to this new role, acclimate to how do they build a really successful leadership team so they're all rowing in the right direction. So there are times I come in after the succession has happened, but it's really fun for me, I'd say, and beneficial for the families. It's not all about me, but to be with them through that whole process. And they have someone that they trust through all of that. And families will keep me on as an advisor, a trusted confidant for years to have that person to support them, guide them. I mean, it's emotions, but it's also thoughts and behaviors. And how do I motivate a team member? How do I communicate with a team member that's conflict avoidant, especially if I have a more aggressive style? how do I get the company to see me as in charge when they worked under the previous generation? All of those are about psychology,
Yeah,
communication, emotional intelligence. It's all psychology.
it is, which is why I'm so glad that that's your area of specialty. Like I said, I kind of dabble in that, but you really do need someone who can help you do that, both with family members and non-family members, because usually by the
Yes.
time you're in that kind of scenario, you have non-family leaders in the
Mhm.
company. And so it makes total sense to me why they would want to keep you on as an advisor. I see something similar in my work where if I'm working with the owner to do a transition, um, particularly if there's an employee who's purchasing or a number of employees who are purchasing, I get so up in their business. Like you're all up and in their brains and in their hearts and in their souls. And I'm all up in looking at their P&Ls and understanding their staffing model and understanding the process and procedure documentation. And then understanding those relationships. Like there's some friction here and these people are still building trust or rebuilding trust, or this is a new member of the team and there's something there that I get to, and these folks are transitioning from being employees to owners, right? That we can have this opportunity to build a depth of bench in terms of our knowledge of how they operate and our knowledge of what success looks like for them, to
Mhm.
be able to reflect. I think it's so important to reflect back to them. Like you said, these things were important. Has anything changed? So how can we address whatever we're trying to do, whether it's a change in the organization and a reorganization that we're talking about, or a change in how we communicate to each other? How can we make these changes so that we are all still working towards the same end result? It's people being people all over the place all the
Yeah, anytime you're dealing with people, there's psychology,
time.
right?
Like, we should
Right.
all just have a basic training and all of that, way more than we
Yeah.
certainly do.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
and that's the great thing in working together is being able to learn and grow for the best interest of the family
yes,
together and just help them with that wraparound approach that we're not just helping them in one siloed area, but we're helping them in a real world way
yes,
because finances don't focus over here and estate planning here and charitable giving here. It's all, yeah, pieces of the puzzle that you're putting together and interconnected.
yeah.
So having a team to surround you with all of that, I think, I've seen that it's the most effective. I have never worked with a company that didn't grow. They they always grow.
Well, I
So,
mean, if you have a solid company that you're passing on to the next generation or you're selling to an external buyer, if there's true value there, then growth should be the outcome of the transition. The tricky part is helping owners maintain a profitable business while doing the heavy lifting of the transition or transaction. Because those are like two full-time jobs, which is why having team members that can help you keep your eye on both of those tracks, because we can't just dive into the transaction or transition and lose sight of our business plan, and we can't just trust that by being profitable somehow a transition will occur. um, that's a lot for anybody to keep track of, and especially a business owner who's trying to accomplish big things. um, you know that I one of my credentials is certified exit planning advisor, and so as part of that, we always talk about what the what next plan is. We always talk about what the team is. We also talk about understanding just the whole process from the side of both business attractiveness. What makes your business attractive to an external buyer? Obviously, things like profitability, month over month revenue, low owner dependence, low customer concentration. There's all sorts of things that go into building the value. Um, but then also personal readiness. And I think in my world, what we're talking about is the importance of personal readiness in the equation. Does that
mhm.
resonate with you?
Oh, 100%. You know, that's the place where sabotage really comes in. If you can't answer questions like what's next for me, who am I without the business? Uh, you know, when is the right timing? When do I see myself doing this? And how am I going to do this? Who's going to be with me? If you can't answer some of those basic questions, they're all red flags that you're not ready and
Yeah.
that you need to prepare. One of the things I'm curious about with you, Christy, is in that preparation, right? And answering those questions. And let's say they ask and they see the red flags. Like, when's the ideal time to engage with you? And then when do people tend to engage with you? Because we all know that it's often later. I mean, I've had that, like, oh gosh, if you brought me in 5 years ago, this would have been so much easier. So
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
curious for you.
The textbook's answer is, especially if a sale is the goal, is 3 to 5 years. Because typically what we find is when we assess business attractiveness and we assess personal readiness, there's a gap in terms of being as well positioned to be attractive to a buyer as possible, and your own ability to have wrapped your brain around all of the things we've been talking about, right? So if you think, oh, I want to retire 5 years from now, this is the time to have the conversation. In fact, if you're thinking of going to retire in 10 or 15 years from now, this is the time to have a conversation. Now, will you need to engage all of the team members we've mentioned all the time for that period? No, no. What you do need to do, though, is making these plans a present tense activity that's part of your strategic approach to your business. And being able, like, we might say, hey, you haven't updated your estate plan in 5 years. Why don't we update the estate plan while we're also working on increasing revenue? Hey, your books aren't quite in order. I wouldn't want to put these in front of a buyer. Let's work on getting the books in a place. And I think you would share the same thing, is that as people work with us over time, our level of involvement can vary. So we can be really in deep and intense, and sort of every week we're doing something with them. And then because we've built such a good foundation and we have such an intimate knowledge of what's going on, we can be a little bit more spaced out in the amount of time we spend or how frequently we meet. And then something might happen and we might go back into that intense period again. But I think
Exactly.
the benefit of a trusted advisor is that maintaining that relationship means that you don't have to, like, you don't have to spend all that time catching up. Like, I already know what we're working on. I already know what your goals are. I already know what we've done and what we were thinking of doing. Um, so the real truthful answer is, if today you're starting a business or buying a business, I hope that you're looking at it with, how do I grow this so that it's the most valuable asset I have? Which means I'm already thinking about what the end looks like. If you
Mhm.
haven't done that, I would say for just about everybody, it's not too soon to at least have a conversation about, like, I work way too many hours a week. How do I start to scale that back? I have all these feelings about money. How do I sort through some of those feelings about money, because they're also impacting my ability to execute on my growth plan? Right? Like, there's opportunities where you might have a conversation with Dr. Donna and a conversation with me, because I'm like, okay, we need to increase your pricing, position you in a new way, open up and repackage this product and get rid of this product line. And you're probably going to have feelings about all those things. I'm not worth that much. I can't charge that much. People won't pay that much. This product was my flagship product. What does it mean to not carry it anymore? Right. And
Mhm.
again, I dabble. So we can talk about all those things. But if they're really standing between you and executing on the plan that we've put together, I'm going to refer you to Dr. Donna and say, there's more going on here. This isn't about having a good plan and executing on it well. There are there are definitely feelings that are making it harder for this owner to execute on the plan that they want.
Yeah. I mean, I think a sign of that too is like when people are all on board and they agree in the meeting and then they step out and do all the opposite things.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's one of those things. I don't think they're most of the time not intentionally being passive aggressive, but they lose that sort of commitment when they're on their own, and then the emotions, the fears, the thoughts come in, and then stepping back is the biggest one, getting their fingers out of the pot, even though they know the business is not going to survive if they can't step out, right? It's not going to be saleable. The next generation won't have the opportunity to step into those shoes because you know, the business is too dependent on you. One of the things I say a lot is, like, I see my clients, they go on vacation, but they are checking in constantly with work, email, text. And of course, from a psychology standpoint, I want them to have self-care, to rejuvenate. You're actually more productive and efficient when you do those things. But since that's not always motivating for them,
Mhm.
it's like, you're not going to get the best value for your business if you can't step away for a vacation.
Yeah,
And that's
100%.
sometimes the hook, right?
100%. I would say, especially for older owners, the valuation probably is more motivating than the personal time.
Hmm.
Um, and I can say for myself that, when I look at my mom who's still working full time in her 70s, I feel disappointed for her. But that is a source of purpose and meaning for her.
Yeah.
And so if you are a younger generation looking to take on the family business, you are going to bring different values to the table. And they're not necessarily better or worse. A parent's decision to work in the business well past what we would consider retirement is not necessarily a bad thing. But also being able to navigate, how are you going to be able to run the business the way that's aligned with your values? And how are we going to help them step
Hmm.
back so that the value is there for the buyer? Donna, there's actually two comments in from people who are with us. And
Oh.
so Jacqueline is asking, how do you get someone to talk about it, whatever it is, if they just refuse to? Like, they're just not going to come to the table.
Hmm.
What happens then?
Yeah. You know what? I have found that if you can have that one call, right? At least in my experience, when I can have that one call with them and they get to meet me and know me and trust me, they'll come to the table. Sometimes you need to meet with people one on one first before you can get them into a family meeting.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is to join people where they're at. People want to feel seen and heard. And if you're trying to get them to some end result too fast or pushing for that, you really need to listen and hear, even, why don't you want to do this? Just starting with that question, and having a lot of curiosity is important. Not making assumptions, but being curious. Like, what does this all mean to you? And what's that resistance? And what is the scenario you're playing out in your head? And then what if it didn't go that way?
Right.
What's the result you would like to see if we're going to do this? I think sometimes that resistance comes back to that multi-generational differences in values and mindset. And
Yep.
so, I've seen where we talk about, the silent generation and the boomer generation being resistant to retire and being all in. And, like, that's not a bad thing, but then maybe they get nervous or resistant to passing along because, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X want more time with their family and they're not willing to do the same hours, and so that creates a lot of fear. What if this fails? Then this is the way you're supposed to do it.
Right.
So having private conversation first, letting them get to know you, and really making sure they feel seen and heard, and that this is not about ganging up on anyone, but it's
It's not
about
about judging.
communicating.
Like you
Yes.
said, being really curious. Like, I did not approach my mom's choice to continue working from curiosity. It was definitely from judgment. Like, why are you doing this? You should want this. You should want that. And when I got curious about it, then I was like, if she wants to do that, so be it. If it makes her happy, it's not what would make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was judging it by. That won't make me happy. And
Yeah.
once I could let it go and be like, but that makes her happy. And so then I can do everything if I want to find 500 different ways to help her retire, that's great. But if that doesn't make her happy, that's all about me and that's on me and that's not on her. The other question we have is, how do you work with dynamics of non-family leadership in conflict with family owners? And the question does not distinguish between family owners who actually work in the business versus owners who simply have control over the business. But I'm sure you've encountered both.
Oh, yeah. One of the situations I've encountered is there is you have a C-suite non-family member, and then a family member who is in a role employee-wise below you, but they're also an owner, they're also
Ooh.
on the board, right? So you have multiple roles, and then they come in and want something done, but you're in the middle of a bigger project, say that maybe another family owner asks you to do. That is like they're afraid of making either one disappointed, angry. How do I manage these things? And it's really important to one, clarify the roles you're playing in conversations. So
I'm
and
talking to you
so.
as my junior associate, not as the
Mhm.
owner of the company.
Exactly. Exactly. Because this thing here is related to your role, and you handed this to me in this particular role, right? Also, you need to talk to the family members and say, how do you want me to prioritize things? Right? And sort of get that clarity and of expectations, and then use that as your guidepost. It can get very complicated. Also, you see how the family dynamics impact the culture in in a room, in the
Oh, yeah.
workplace. Is there mom and dad had a fight, right? And now, oh, everybody can feel it. So it's like increasing awareness of the family members, of their impact, and then working with the non-family members to share ideas, be comfortable pushing back. Most family businesses are not hiring non-family members to be yes men or yes women. They want diversity of thought, and just how the attitudes and the comfortability are key there.
And that clarity of role, purpose, and responsibility, and I would say also process, that's advice I give everybody, whether they're related to the people they're working with or not. And I think it's one of the things that causes some of the greatest confusion, frustration, disappointment is that there's not a real clarity of why are we here, who's doing what, how does it get done. Um, and to me, although I have not had to negotiate this particular relationship myself, of if there is a family member who's been hired but does not actually have the core competencies, if everybody in the organization is being evaluated on core competencies, then they are not the exception to the rule. This isn't singling them out. This isn't trying to attack them. This is actually, I think, supports the family's ability to separate family lineage, shared DNA, ownership, and management. And if we choose to manage everyone in the organization against competencies, then it could potentially really, not only from my perspective, that's good business, right? That really helps us get the highest performing team, but it can also diffuse some of these really complicated relationships.
Yes. I think pragmatically, things that you do, Chrissy, with setting out what the process is, like just as these are the facts and everybody follows that. And certain guidelines like that are crucial to take some of the emotion out of it. And the other thing I really hear is about governance, and family businesses are often resistant to governance, particularly boards with non-family members on them.
Yep.
But it's such a great way to have diverse perspectives, as well as evaluating goodness of fit and things like that. And it's hard, very hard, right? First, the non-family members have to be comfortable to say what they need to say in that boardroom. But an advantage too is it can make it a little less like, oh, my family just doesn't want me here,
Right.
like it was a team decision. And maybe it's not that they don't want you here, but it's goodness of fit for the role. And I talk a lot about strengths and leveraging strengths and getting people in the roles that really play to their strengths and out of the roles that are really just not a good fit and they don't enjoy them. And so they don't do well at them.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is having an ownership stake in a company should actually come with some benefits. And I mean that by this virtue of you don't have to work in a business simply because you own it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so separating ownership and occupation can be really healthy for families, but it can also be really healthy for solo owners who, again, whose identity is really wrapped up in being the owner of the business. And um, there's always that stage where you're owner operator, but you don't always have to work in the business to reap the financial rewards from a business. And that's a huge mental shift. It's probably as big as going from being an employee to an owner. So I think if you've been with us this whole time, the need to have transparent, frequent conversations about what you want for your business, what you want with your family vis-a-vis your business, what you want to be your legacy, what you want to be your lifestyle, all the things that businesses enable. That's what we want for you. I can confidently say on Donna's behalf, what we want is for you to be as happy in your business and successful on your terms in your business as humanly possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say, avoid those assumptions, be curious, and have an annual family meeting
I
where
love
you
that.
talk about all of these things, right? Because maybe you do change your ideas of what succession looks like, or maybe it's now 10 years out. You better talk to people about that. Or maybe this one decides they no longer want to be in the business, but just have a structure where once a year you come back and maybe answer specific questions each year to see where everybody is. And families change too, and there's lots to discuss there and to include. And if you want other generations to take over the business, they really need to be involved with those conversations.
So that is definitely our primary takeaway, is if you want people to be involved, you have to talk with them. And also that you don't have to do this alone. You do not have to have these conversations in isolation. And that you can change your mind. I would say part of the exit planning advisor methodology that I adhere to is an idea that every 90 days you could be asking, do we continue on our growth trajectory or do we position ourselves to sell? And so much can happen in 90 days. So much can happen, right? And so you might be like, I know for the next 5 years, nothing's going to change. I challenge you that is nigh on impossible. Your choices might not change, but the circumstances most certainly will. And having that conscious evaluation of where you are, what circumstances are today versus what they were before, and what you really want today versus what you wanted in the past, and then having that dialogue is really important. So,
Yeah.
we would say call us off early and call us often.
Yes, I was just thinking that. Yeah, prepare early. And I would say, as much as nobody wants to be in an emergency or crisis situation, have a plan for it.
Oh,
Hopefully
for
you
sure.
never have to use it, but have a plan for it.
And that can actually be an easier place to start, because when we talk about this hypothetical bad thing that might happen to us, or if we hypothetically go to Tahiti for the next 3 years, um, it kind of takes out now we're just dealing with the situation, right? And we can hypothesize about it and plan it out and put some things in place that are a little less charged. So I also would say use emergency succession planning or business continuity planning as a way to broach some of these subjects, because you'll find that as you start to make certain decisions, it will lead you to question, oh, well, how does that impact this? And what might that mean if this happened? So I love that advice, Donna.
Yeah. And one of the things I like, Christy, that you do is bring that breadth of knowledge of making sure they're looking at all the pieces and asking the right questions. And then, bringing in the team for like where that's the end of your knowledge and you need an expert in that particular area, but you really help families check all the boxes, which I think is really important.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, one of our participants thanks us for this great discussion and learning some important things. So that is honestly when Donna and I got together and said, we should actually do what we do naturally, which is get on the Zoom and just throw a billion ideas together. And like, have you seen this? And my gosh, what do you do when this happens?
Yeah.
We wanted to create a space where we could have that conversation out in the open and really start to normalize these conversations. So thank you for participating and being with us today. Donna, any closing thoughts?
Just don't be afraid to reach out and start building your team. And if Chrissy or I can answer any questions for you, obviously you can find us on LinkedIn.
Of course. Thank you so much, everybody.
Okay. Bye.